Groupthink is much more common than you think. Let's talk about it on this episode of You Can't Say That in Church. Welcome to You Can't Say That in Church, a video podcast where we talk about all the topics that you don't want to talk about. My name is Chandrise and I'm your host, and each episode we talk about a topic that is typically avoided in the church. Last week we talked about cults. We said that there are common characteristics that are found amongst most cults, and that one of those characteristics is a charismatic leader. But we made a distinction and we said that a charismatic leader that points to themselves as the one to be worshipped is typically a cult leader, whereas a charismatic leader that points to Jesus or God as the one to be worshipped is more of a religious leader. Today, we're going to talk about the second cousin of cults, groupthink. Now, groupthink is often that thing that people will look at inside of a church that makes them say, yep, that's a cult. But groupthink is actually really common amongst most groups. And so that's why it's so important that we're aware of it so that we can stop its negative effects. Groupthink is when individuals in a close-knit group decide that they would rather make decisions that are unified so that they can promote harmony within the group rather than voice their doubts or alternatives that may lead to dissension within the group. Oftentimes, this phenomenon can lead to bad decision-making. One of the most common examples of groupthink are the decisions that led to the explosion of the Challenger space shuttle in 1986, in which 7 astronauts lost their lives. Most people will agree that this accident was completely predictable and completely avoidable. Now, I'm not an astrophysicist, but I'm going to do my best to explain to you how this accident occurred. The Challenger space shuttle had a piece called an O-ring. Now, the O-ring was supposed to surround the fuel tank and act as a seal so that rocket fuel didn't leak out onto the open flame of the space shuttle and cause an explosion. The O-ring was a crucial piece, and it only worked at 53 degrees or higher. The night before the launch, the temperature had fallen to around 20 degrees, and engineers started to express their concern to NASA because the O-ring was not functional at below 53 degrees because it became stiff and it didn't act as a seal like it was supposed to. It's a crucial piece of the shuttle. But NASA responded to the engineers and they said, hey, are you sure? Because we have a lot riding on this launch happening today. We have had so many delays. We've had people losing interest in the space program. We told people that we were going to be able to have 50 missions a year. We've had like 5, and we want to be able to send people to space just as easily as they are able to take a flight. And so we need to do this. We have a teacher on board. This teacher is going to show people that civilians can go to space. We need to have this publicity. And the president's mentioning it tonight. So we need to do this. Next thing you know, the O-ring, which is a crucial part of the shuttle and a crucial part of the pre-launch checks, stopped being mentioned. 73 seconds after launch, the shuttle exploded. Clearly, this is one of the more tragic results of groupthink, but it's important that we're just aware of it so that we can stop it from reaching results that we do not desire. Now, it's important to know that God has not called us to groupthink. Sometimes as Christians, when we die to our individualism, we think that also means that we have to die to our individuality. But God did not create you to be a clone. You are fearfully and wonderfully made to be a specific person with characteristics unique to you. Paul talks about this in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. He says in verse 14, now the body is not made up of one part, but of many. In verse 17, he says, if the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has arranged the parts in the body, every one of them, just as he wanted them to be. If they were all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, but one body. So given all that we've already talked about today, today's question is, how can church groups identify and prevent groupthink? One way to combat groupthink is to be aware of how common it really is. In fact, it's probably safest to assume that it's already happening in your group. So let's talk about some ways to identify it. One way is self-censorship. This means that you probably have a doubt or a differing opinion from the group. However, you don't voice it because you are afraid to cause any dissension. The second way is rationalization. This means that you definitely have a doubt, but you're going to ignore it. You're going to bury it deep down inside. You're going to kind of come up with an excuse for why everything is okay because you don't want to disagree with the group, but you also don't want to have that feeling of cognitive dissonance within yourself. A third way is the pressures of your environment. Maybe you're in a group where people are not very happy when others are vocal about differing opinions. Maybe they kind of smash down anything that is different from the group opinion. Just be aware that this is a common symptom of groupthink. It doesn't always mean you're right, but just be aware that when the environment doesn't promote differing opinions, then groupthink is likely to be prevalent. A fourth way, which is very common in the church, is that the people making decisions believe that they have the moral high ground, and so they don't believe that they are capable of making immoral decisions. There are 4 other symptoms that are identified by psychologist Irving Janis, but I'm going to allow you guys to look those up in the interest of time. So now that we know how to identify groupthink and we know that we need to be looking for it everywhere, we need to make sure that we are combating this on a small scale and on a large scale in our individual lives and in the groups that we are within. We need to be promoting the flow of information. We need to promote a little bit of pushback so that we can make sure that our ideas are not leading to really poor decision making. But we want to hear from you. You can go ahead and drop your opinions in the comments. And if you like the content, if you like the conversation, you can subscribe to the channel. Stay chewy.